appointment here with world-renowned Dr. Bob Rakowski. Super, super exciting. This is a dream come true. It truly is. I didn't think that this would really ever happen, even though we've got somewhat of a candid relationship and it's been nurturing over these years. But I didn't think that I'd ever have you here at my house shooting a podcast. So,
well, I dressed up special for you, Brandon. I even lost a tooth for you today. So
I saw that. So I didn't hit you or anything like that, but it was just a freak accident. Do you want to share what happened, or?
You know what? I knocked this tooth out 55 years ago, and just because I know about how the body works, I didn't want to spike up in my jaw, causing problems. So I have something called a cantilever bridge, and it's not as stable as a spike. So about every decade, whether I need to or not, I take a bite out of something and I break it. Last time I did that, I was a keynote speaker at a major conference, and someone looked at me and said, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" I said, "Don't worry about me. It's the other guy I'm concerned about." Right. And that was a joke, but literally it spread through the conference that Rakowski just manhandled someone and we don't know if he's going to make it. So, but you know what? This was a tooth accident from a bite, and I'll get it fixed next week. And grateful for modern dentistry.
Of course, and you're still here to tell the tale, and it's going to be a beautiful one. So why don't we share first with the audience, the listenership and the viewership, who you are, your background. Many of my students know who you are. I rave about you, but there's still a tremendous, interestingly enough, with the modern world that we have, not enough people still don't know who you are. So do you want to just share your background?
Well, let me just say they don't know who I am because I got heavily censored from 2020, despite having taught over 10,000 hours of seminars all over the world to hundreds of thousands of doctors and impacting millions of patients. But what message was I sharing? Health, happiness, success, the natural way, the way I believe we're all designed to enjoy it. But who am I? Always a student like you, but sometimes a teacher. And to the tune of, really enjoying the big stage, watching the lights come on, showing people connections that they hadn't seen, or maybe sharing something with them that they'd forgotten. Because I really like the idea that most learning is a remembering. Because I think inherently we know what's good for us, we know what we should do, we just need reminders.
How do you present that idea that we're all knowing, or it's a remembering to someone that's, let's just say, use the word really unplugged, for example, or maybe really plugged in, depending on which way you want to look at it.
It could be either way, right? You can overthink, you can underthink. One of my favorite TED Talks is entitled Everything's Connected, Here's How. And they go back to the Big Bang. And by the way, before the Big Bang, they call it the Great Singularity. So every ounce of matter, every bit of energy in the entire universe was something in the size of a pea, which I have a hard time wrapping my mind around that, but scientists agree on that. And if we all go back to that same singularity, that Big Bang, then aren't we connected? Aren't we brothers and sisters? Aren't we of the same substance? And if we are, why don't we just try to get along and realize that everything in this beautiful universe has a purpose? Now, I think that starts to build a bridge for a lot of people, but then you tell them something, go, that makes sense. Well, why does it make sense? Because it resonates with your soul, and your soul knows what resonates. And I heard this quote the other day, souls don't have color. So why should we? I don't know that souls have gender, but I do know that gender is real. We have men, we have women. That's animal, vegetable, mineral. And I'm very happy for that, right? But, we live in a world where it's easy to hijack people's brains. So what you're doing, going out into nature, connecting with who we really are, creating the environment of your choice, it's really a path that models what we all should be doing.
It's difficult, though, in this modern day and age to try to go back to what we were doing in our primitive years. And there's so much of an emphasis, there's so many more dialogues and conversations of people saying, go back to nature, simplify things. But it's so difficult. So my question is, what are some tools that individuals can use if even the simplification of going out to nature is still difficult to achieve?
I want to kind of tweak that a little bit. It's not difficult, it's not challenging, and we shouldn't displace all the advancements of modern science. If you ask me, would I want to go back 200 years when everything was all organic and everything else? No, life expectancy was short. Kids died. They didn't know they were supposed to wash their hands after autopsies and deliver babies. I don't want to go back to that. But could we use modern science? Could you ask AI, is there a value to earthing? Is there a value to first morning light? Is there a value to clean water? Is there a value to breathing and meditation? Is there a value to moving every joint, every range of motion, every day pain-free? Is there a value to what I call the Magnificent Seven, eating right, drinking right, thinking right, moving right, sleeping right, pooping right, talking right? And how do we implement those things? And it would come back and say, you know what, you're complicating. If God made it, it's okay. If man made it, stay away. Drink pure, clean fluids, certainly no liquid calories because those are harder on the system. Get peace of mind, get purpose. And we were talking a little bit about purpose before the podcast. Then you've gone back to your essence, and I think it's easier to thrive. The more natural we go, and natural becomes more natural as you found. You suddenly do something natural, you want to do something else because you realize, wow, that's better for me.
Yeah.
And who doesn't want to feel better?
Of course. Let's talk about liquid calories first, because that's sort of an easy topic, but it can be a little bit confusing. And I'm going to pick on the men right now. Not necessarily pick, but I want to direct this to the men. I was literally having a conversation with Dr. Tom just the other day, actually, about glyphosate.
Yep.
And then I directed it in the conversation of, because he was referencing when individuals are challenged with pregnancy, for example, couples, predominantly, or we used to put a heavy blame on the women, saying, oh, her eggs aren't working, or she's toxic. But now they're finding that the quality of sperm has such a major influence on pregnancy. And they identified when they were observing sperm or detecting, they found that there's significant amounts of glyphosate and it impacted the motility and the quality. And I said, okay, well, what do most men in the Western civilization, the Western countries do? Well, they drink beer, a lot of them, and they play golf.
Oh boy.
Right?
I didn't think about that one. Sure.
And when he mentioned that was the first thing that I thought it was the golf courses.
Yeah.
So do you want to share that, but then it's also tying into the liquid calories because beer, but people don't think about the glyphosate with all of these grains, right?
Well, you kind of took an infertility challenge, or tangent that I want to just go on because we've known for a long, long time, healthy plants don't reproduce. Healthy animals don't reproduce. Healthy humans also don't reproduce. So if you're having a reproductive problem.
Hold on. Healthy animals, healthy humans don't reproduce, or
sorry, sick.
We're gonna use that. That'll be a hook.
God,
okay.
Oh yeah. All right. Sick plants don't reproduce. Sick animals don't reproduce.
Right.
Sick humans don't reproduce. And we're finding, this massive infertility, and 1/3 of the time it's male when they can't conceive at all. But keep in mind, if the sperm quality maybe can create a life, that quality will directly represent at least the start of that life. Now, I know that humans are profoundly expansive. A good start generally leads to a good finish. It takes a lot of effort to get over a bad start. And what nature does is
say that one more time, with a good start and a good finish, because
a good start generally leads to a good finish. That good sperm meets that good egg in a good womb, in a good intrauterine environment, in a good home, in a loving relationship, born by natural means, like my granddaughters in a tub of Kangen water with Mozart, and not being intoxicated moments after birth and even stabbing their beautiful little bodies. That's a horrible start that I wouldn't wish on anybody, that most babies are getting. We've normalized, medicalized having a baby. If that needed to be medical, none of us would be here. And in fact, let's just go to that for a moment. We learned in chiropractic college, I'm a chiropractor, they said, why would anybody wanting to deliver a baby lie on their back? No one throughout history would ever do that. You'd squat and hold on to a tree because it's a whole lot easier. So you look and, modern science, modern medicine in many ways is a detriment to society, and we're beginning to see this.
It's out of convenience, I guess, for the practitioners.
Exactly.
Doctors
will do C-sections for convenience. They'll induce for convenience. They'll put the mom in a position for their convenience. How about that baby? That's the one we should be thinking of, right? And we always want to protect them through every way. But if we want to spin back to liquid calories for a second, here's what we know. They're far less satisfying than chewed calories. And that means you'll likely consume more. Now, you went to glyphosate, known as Roundup. First of all, they use, I don't know how many millions of tons of that every single year. They're linking it to a number of cancers, birth defects, infertility, and even the medical literature calls it an autism accelerator. By the way, along with the antibiotic Augmentin and Tylenol. Tylenol got some press lately. Personally, I don't think Tylenol is the cause of autism, but I believe it was 2008, maybe 2009, PubMed study, University of San Diego. They found out if babies got the MMR shot and were given a Tylenol injection afterwards, the risk of autism went up 611%.
What year was that?
2008.
Right,
Yeah,
so that was before COVID, right? And
long before.
Yeah, so they're researching.
Brendan, we've known this for a long, long time, but for the fun of it, I asked AI that today, and AI is still a propaganda machine, even the good ones, right? They're saying, no, there's no link between vaccines and autism. Right. Tell the hundreds of families that have been to me where their child was perfectly normal, got a shot and spiraled to irreversible brain damage, or look at the $5.3 billion that the U.S. has paid out in vaccine-induced damage.
Well, but you said a good start should equal, or it should at least be...
It helps towards a great finish.
Right. Now, can we put the blame on the vaccines, or can we just say that was one of many straws?
It certainly is one of many.
Right.
It's one of many, right? So certainly the vast majority of children that are vaccinated, even on this ridiculous schedule. And why do I say it's ridiculous? Because I looked at this before based on a question that I received. If I were to ask you, what is the probability of a healthy child in North America today, non-vaccinated, dying from any vaccine-preventable disease? You have any idea what that number would be?
It should be a very, very low number.
The probability the child was struck by lightning and killed is higher than them dying from a vaccine-preventable disease.
Right.
Anybody that wants can verify that. So the numbers are somewhere between 1 in 2 million and 1 in 10 million. So why do we need to vaccinate every kid starting after the moment of birth? In the US, they do for hepatitis B, which is transferred by IV drug use or homosexual anal receptive sex. So what makes you think a child that's just out of the womb is at risk for any of that?
Sure.
It's just foolish.
And this is obviously interesting how we're taking this direction in conversation.
It's definitely going to serpentine everywhere, right?
Right, but this is the point of these types of dialogues is just to influence and create or provoke curiosity, right? That's ultimately it for the audience. It's just
ask a better question, get a better answer.
Right, and as Dr. DeMartini says, the quality of your life is based on the quality of questions that you ask. So we've discussed the liquid calories, and that's crazy. And the reason why I said that is men need to know that what you're doing is when you're drinking these beers, oh my goodness, you're poisoning your body.
Yeah, low T, once you start losing the T, you might not care. You want a beer instead of a woman, right? And that's not how we're wired.
Right. So how do you want to direct the next part of this conversation then? What's really important for us to be paying attention to if... Obviously, we got to look out for liquid calories.
Sure.
Trying to keep things basic and simple going out in nature. I think we didn't really discuss that too much. Why is that so important, and why is it repeating now more than ever to go back to some of our old habits, our old ways?
Well, probably because we violated nature. You start looking at all these EMFs around us, and some people are more sensitive than others. They used to use the analogy of the canary in the coal mine. Maybe most of us or a lot of us are adapted to that right now, but Mother Earth is called Mother Earth for a reason. When you step on that ground barefoot, you get electrons, which are essentially the particles of life. Now, I know they did a super collider, and they call it the Higgs particle and the God's particle, and they get subatomic. But you can go as far down the rabbit hole as you want, but life is the movement of electrons. And we get those from Mother Earth, and they make everything better. What is an antioxidant? An electron donor. What is aging? Loss of electrons. Walking on the Earth, or even sitting, right? Why not put whole body contact with it? You're getting the best thing that Mother Earth can offer. Then if you're getting good clean food, good clean air, good clean water, you're there. But if you talk about where this goes, it depends on how deep you want to go or how many topics. The Magnificent Seven: eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right, or the Deadly Quartet, which there's a backstory on that: stress, toxins, malnutrition, physical inactivity. Those are the things that are killing people.
What's more predominant, the deadly quartet? Well, no, of course, it's the deadly quartet,
Yep.
but then what happens is the Magnificent Seven
Is the solution.
right.
Yeah.
But then it's also it's the feedback of how dominant those deadly quartets are being played and strung and so forth. Do you want to just expand on that, because I think some people might not necessarily be aware of those.
Well, let's go. As far as I know, I'm the one that came up with this. So there was an article, Archives of Internal Medicine, 1989, that was entitled "The Deadly Quartet," and they said, and I'll use the word big. They said if you had a big belly, big blood sugar, in other words, prediabetes, big blood fat, high cholesterol, and big blood pressure, you were going to die early. Well, none of those are causes. They're all downstream. And so I said, what's the real deadly quartet? Well, stress. And if you ask AI, was stress the number one killer in the history of the planet and still today? It would say, yeah, you can make a good case for that. How about toxins? Well, not since the history of humanity, but it certainly is on the rise over the modern living, right? Mm-hmm. Especially the last 100 years.
Right.
How about malnutrition? Huge cause of death. And then finally, how about physical inactivity? That's relatively new. You know, I mean, you got people right now that their idea of exercise is picking up a remote and clicking it, right? So that's not going to get us there.
Let's talk about malnutrition, because even when you say that word, the first paradigm program image that comes to my mind is a little orphaned black child
starving to death with a big belly, which, by the way, that's called kwashiorkor, and they don't have enough protein to make albumin and globulin and actually draw the fluid into the blood. So that's a lot of fluid sticking out there. Bad deal.
Right.
But thank God we're feeding people. You know, we, for a long time, have had more than enough food for people, but half of it never gets to people. Half of it rots in transit. So that's really what's going to fix nature. Get good local farmers. You know, I look at you and your gardens, right? Your garden boxes.
Yeah.
We put those in too. You could be self-sufficient. Why not lead everybody in that direction? But what we've done in the sense of trying to make food convenient, make food last, solve the spoilage problem, is we've created not food, but science fair projects. You know, and Michael Pollan did a real good job in his book, Defense of Food. He said, you know, a loaf of bread 100 years ago had 5 ingredients. Now it has 35, and 30 you can't pronounce. So it's a chemistry experiment. It doesn't spoil. You look at a Twinkie. I found something on the internet. A guy left a whole case of Twinkies. Who buys a case of Twinkies? In his trunk. Found it 20 years later. They look the same. They smell the same. They taste the same. Even mold wouldn't eat it. So, and by the way, mold's pretty smart, believe it or not. It really is. They had to design a subway system in Japan.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that.
Yeah.
So that's a powerful statement. We'll say that again, is about food, and then they're playing science experiments.
Yeah, well, let's just go this. There's no such thing as junk food. There's junk and there's food. And you know what? If it's got an ingredient you can't pronounce, it's probably junk and a science experiment. And by the time you start adding 30 chemicals to something as simple as a loaf of bread, what are you getting? A lot of chemicals. What does your body do with it? Well, what we're finding out is at super low quantities, low duration, minimal exposure, you process it out. But what if you're eating that multiple times a day, every day, weeks, months, years on end? We're seeing the results. And it's severe chronic illness and obesity.
Could you give us an example of what that would typically look like for a North American?
Which part?
The food consumption?
Oh, God. Well, 73% is ultra-processed. And then we would say that the predominance of what's in there in terms of ingredients is not natural. Bodies don't know what to do with it. You know, Robert Lustig, I like him a lot. He was in a documentary, The Skinny on Obesity. His most recent book, Metabolical, I'll give it a big plug. He talks about metabolism, what your body does with food, and then diabolical, what happens to the food before it gets in us.
Ooh, I love that. Say that.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Say that one more time.
Metabolism is what happens to food in the body. Diabolical is what happens to food before it gets to our body.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. And he's talking about between the herbicides, the insecticides, the fungicides. Let's just talk about nutrient depletion. Mm-hmm. Farmers found out about 100 years ago that you could grow big plants that look good on the outside and were even strong, you know, on some level, with 3 elements: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
Right.
But over time, those plants became so sick that they had to genetically modify them to use stronger and more herbicides, insecticides, fungicides. And then suddenly you get a weaker plant, and this concept of hormesis, an urging, a message that comes, plant chemicals can stimulate human physiology. And if a healthy plant has a healthy immune system, those of us that consume it get that benefit. But what kind of immune system does a plant have that never had to develop one? From the moment that seed was planted, it was artificially protected by poisons. It'd be like giving a baby antibiotics in the womb, antibiotics all the way through. What would you expect the life of that baby to be? I'll just ask you that right up. You know what antibiotics appropriately can do, but how about inappropriately?
Oh my God, the damage is quite significant.
Between, one, mitochondria actually were derived from, a bacteria originally. In fact, they suggest the original one they called typhus. And we know that to some degree antibiotics will damage mitochondria, which can, under ideal circumstances, make 94.4% of human energy. Then we have more bugs in the gut than we have even stars in the known universe, and we kill those off. Antibiotics are against life, and we overgrow yeast and parasite and fungus, and they start poisoning us. And people realize, my gosh, I eat this thing that should be good. Why do I feel so bad? You're first feeding bad organisms, creating toxic byproducts, and poisoning your brain, body, and spirit.
Right.
And, antibiotics, let's face it, we're all exposed to them. Over 80% of antibiotics are used in livestock. If you buy any meat that's not organic, you're getting antibiotics. Any milk, any eggs that's not organic, you're getting antibiotics. But then they found out these cows that eat the antibiotics poop, and the antibiotics go in the soil, and the plants take it up. So we can't get anything cleaner. It's very, very difficult to get pure today.
You talked about hormesis.
Yep.
And then we're talking about plant chemicals. And
Yep.
naturally, those can induce a healthy hormetic response in humans. But if we've completely blasted our microbiome, then in turn it's going to result in a sort of...
It could.
It could.
It could. So for instance, I tell people the difference between good bugs and bad is what they eat and what they poop.
Right.
Good bugs eat poop, poop nutrients. Bad bugs eat nutrients and poop toxins. So now you start putting in these good nutrients, the bad bugs are eating the nutrients, pooping toxins. So that could be the bad outcome of that.
That also reminds me of a podcast with Dr. Terry Walls.
Yes.
I love her.
Oh, I do too.
She's special.
What a great story, yeah.
Yeah, she was discussing about the hormetic stress response with plants. And I'm sure you know Dr. Paul Saladino, right?
Yeah,
He's very, very,
MD.
very, very adamant about the carnivore diet.
Yep.
And then we've got others that are so other side with hardcore veganism and vegetarianism. I like Dr. Terry Walls because she even enjoys kale periodically and spinach periodically. Do you want to talk about those different types of hormetic stress responses from those plants and vegetables and what they can do to the body, but on the flip side, how negative or how bad can it be if we overconsume some of those plants?
Well, first of all, we want variety, but I am, by the way, now writing my book, and I'll certainly have a chapter on eat right and drink right and think right, but eat right, structure determines function. And what I have is an omnivore mouth, omnivore digestive tract, and that means I can tear, I can rip, I can grind plants. I have what I need to use all those things. So what's right for me? We can go back 2,000 years ago, and Lucretius said, one man's food's another man's poison. So what appeared to be a really good food wasn't good for everybody even 2,000 years ago, and that's something you can take to the bank. You want to look at yourself. Someone, even with a good microbiome, it might be a bad food for them. So you mentioned Tom O'Brien, and his claim to fame is gluten. And look, celiac is not the only bad outcome of gluten, and he'll make the statement, nobody should have it ever.
Right.
I'm not going to be that extreme. I think healthy people can have limited quantities intermittently and maybe even benefit, right? I don't know that it's all bad, but genetically modified, the data is clear. It's exceptionally bad for people. With bad microbiome, it's exceptionally bad. The safe bet is to not put it in your system. But then you start looking at spinach and you start looking at kale and you start looking at phytates and oxalates and you go, is there something in there that could be bad for somebody? There's no doubt that there could be. But, I teach nutrition all over the world, and I ask the question, is anybody aware of a 100-year-old carnivore? Nowhere to be found. How about a 100-year-old vegan? They're all over, but they're not. Because these 100-year-old vegans' first meal was colostrum and mother's milk. So they didn't start out that way, right?
Right.
So somewhere along the line, they got the idea, maybe plants are better for me. Listen, I think there's good reason to be plant-based.
Okay.
There's also good reasons for carnivore stints. In fact, my most popular and I believe impactful elimination diet these days is 10 days of carnivore. And if I want to be extreme, red meat, salt, and water. And for the majority of my cases, I believe that there's enough die-off of the bad bugs in their gut that immediately they can start handling and enjoying foods that previously they couldn't. And I'm seeing this across every demographic, from kids to geriatrics and everything in between. So there's something to it, but I don't believe it's a forever diet.
Let's delve into that, because as myself as a practitioner, I'm definitely dominant in teaching the benefits of carnivore, not gold standard for the rest of your life.
Yep.
I've seen a significant success by incorporating this for a certain period of time. What is your overall observation when you're applying this, and why do so many people demonize meat, right, for those that don't know? But again, why is meat such a healing and still a questionable approach for most mainstream people?
Well, I believe meat got a bad rap when cholesterol was elevated to some molecule that no one should ever have. And if we didn't have any cholesterol, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Our brain has more than 500% the concentration of cholesterol than an egg. So do you think our brain needs cholesterol? If it didn't, we wouldn't have put it there. And our liver is going to make 80% of it. So they looked at red meat having cholesterol. And by the way, the Framingham heart study, the data was really tweaked. They really didn't find a correlation between cholesterol and cardiovascular disease. Nothing that you could hang your hat on. And even when they look at these statin drugs, people can look at British Medical Journal. Powerful study. They had two different demographics. There were people that were perfectly qualified to take these cholesterol-lowering drugs, statins. Mm-hmm. They had a first heart attack. They had high cholesterol. It made sense to give them statins. Half of their population was able to take it and did it for the rest of their life. The other half had such bad side effects or philosophical differences, they said, we're just not going to do that. It's not worth it. So they followed them throughout their entire longevity. They followed from beginning of the study to end. Well, the people that took the statins lived longer. So medicine would say, man, that's awesome. But I play the guessing game with my patients. How much longer do you think they lived? And I'll ask you that unless you don't know the study.
I don't know the study.
Well, so tell me, let's guess. They took the statins every day for the rest of their life, and they needed it based on medical standards. Mm-hmm. Had a first heart attack, perfect candidate. Mm-hmm. How much longer did they live?
How much longer did they live by taking those statins? This is after first heart attack.
After first heart attack. They lived how much longer life span-wise? So let's say one person lived 10 years, the other person lived how much longer?
Oh, I'm going to say between maybe 3 and 9%.
Okay, so 10 years, 3%. We'd have to break that into months.
Yeah,
right.
I don't think it's significant. I'm going to guess.
Well, I wouldn't. 9% I'd call significant. Okay. 3% maybe when we're talking 10 years. It was 3 to 4 days.
Oh my. Okay. Yeah. So no difference.
We're talking 0.01% if you're going percentage. So It's ridiculous, and it's published. So you look at that and go, what's the justification for this? Now, there are some pretty sharp cardiologists that might say if you have an extreme genetic vulnerability, which they can measure, and these are people that are running, cholesterol of 500, those are US units, triglycerides over 1,000, you could realize that there would be outliers that could benefit. But when you look at the whole population, no way. No way.
And so what does that say about the use of statins then?
Well, I'm going to go back. What does it say about the politics of medicine?
Yeah.
And if they can patent something and if they can sell it, whether you look at the opioid crisis or I'm thinking of these cyclooxygenase 2 inhibitors. I happened to be at a cookout in Texas a few decades ago, and there was a woman there who got a huge Vioxx lawsuit settlement. Her husband was a Texan, was a marathon runner, loved running. He was in his 50s. He says, Doc, my knees are starting to get sore. Is there anything I can do about it? So if he'd been to us, we'll take some glucosamine, take some collagen, maybe take some fish oils, right? But no, this guy said, take Vioxx. And he said, there's no downside to it, right? Well, the guy went out for a run, a couple months later, dropped dead of a heart attack. He didn't have any plaquing, he didn't have any arrhythmia, and they knew that the Vioxx was the downside. By the way, there was a recent shot that they were giving people that they knew might cause some cardiac problems. We even watched athletes drop dead on Monday Night Football, and believe it or not, they're still not coming out and saying, maybe it was the shot. That information is so buried, it's ridiculous. So what are the politics of medicine?
Oh my God.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, by the way, let's just go back to this. There's a book called Lessons of History. I'm sure John DeMartini has read it. You might have it as well. Will Durant, one of the greatest historians in the world, The Lessons of Money. Men who can manage men will manage men who can only manage things. Men who manage money manage everything.
Do you want to say that one more time?
Yeah. Men who can manage men will manage men who can only manage things. Men who manage money manage everything. So think about that. Where's the money? The pharmaceutical industry. They have 1,000x markup.
Yeah.
Now, do they deserve that markup? Maybe. If they spend hundreds of millions to create a life-saving drug, I'm in favor of them getting a profit. I want them to be paid. But when you're going to drug all of society to fill your pockets, not for society's good, that's where we need to put our foot down.
Yeah, I was doing some research for a lesson that I was teaching my students. I can't remember what the topic was originally, but then I went down the rabbit hole and I discovered the true history of Rockefellers with the pharmaceutical industry.
And even medical education.
Right, but it had good intent. And to my understanding it was that...
I might dispute that based on what I read, but okay.
So to my understanding was the Rockefellers and what was the other family? I can't remember the other name, but they were in steel, in manufacturing, correct? And
well, Carnegie was as well.
Right, Carnegie. So and to my understanding was they wanted a healthy workforce. And so they were trying to increase the length of their health with their workforce because
that would be noble.
Right. And but selfishly they wanted a better bottom line, but because it was costing them to have unhealthy workers and they're getting sick and there was plagues and so forth. So what they did is I think they figured out some types of medications and then they started producing those medications
synthetically with byproducts from the petroleum industry.
But the original intent was to preserve the health of their staff, and then in turn that cultivated healthier populations in the communities because those communities were getting sick, but they were all workers. And then the realization happened that, oh my goodness, we can make these medications and then we can start selling them.
Well, interestingly enough, anybody we look at the web of interaction in their body. At times I like to put up the biochemical chart on the wall and look at all the connections. And since I've been in that chart for 45 years, really studying it, working it, tweaking it, first in myself and then, tens of thousands of patients, you come to realize you put a variable into this system, you don't know for sure what's going to happen. You put something good, you suspect something's good is going to happen, but we just talked about you put kale into a body with dysbiosis or that not ready to handle it, it's a bad outcome. You put a toxic product into that web, the ripples appear everywhere.
Right.
And some people have horrific reactions that they don't recover from. So I always ask the question, why would that ever be anyone's first option? We know so many ways and points along that web, so many powerful substances, whether you want to talk about Ganoderma or reishi or resveratrol, or some people are really excited about CoQ10 or whatever the nutrient of the month is. But reality is, when you put in, I like to call it God's pharmacy, nature's pharmacy if you prefer, that's kind of proven in that system from humanity forward to here. This other stuff is brand new, and it's an experiment that just like the statins, we push one thing, what's the cost? And keep in mind, when I said that statin study, the people that were able to take it lived 3 to 4 days longer. What about the people that really shouldn't have taken it, but if their doctor insisted, would they have died months or years earlier?
Right.
I suspect maybe they would have.
Right.
And their quality of life wouldn't have been anywhere near. And by the way, even the people that could take it, many of them, their quality of life isn't where it should be. Based on that, There are a few people that are just beastie that can handle it,
Yep.
but not most.
Well, and that's my falling in love with longevity and biohacking so much that now I'm found myself the friggin' founder of the largest biohacking and longevity summit in the whole nation. But I'm learning about and I'm seeing and observing the difference between health span and lifespan. And there are so many enthusiasts that are really driving that home is quality of life versus lifespan. There's a major difference. And miraculous modern medicine, sure, we've lengthened lifespan, but quality of life, there's quite
Oh, it may have
gap.
actually shortened health span.
Actually,
Yeah.
yes, that's what I meant, yeah.
Well, and keep in mind, these last handful of years, lifespan has gone down.
Right.
Right? We've had more millennials die the last 5 years, some mystery thing going on, than died in all U.S. wars.
Say that again?
We have had more millennials die the last 5 years, really since 2021. They didn't die in 2020 because that virus wasn't going to be bad for millennials, than died in all of the U.S. wars combined.
Are you familiar with the top 5, I'm just asking, causes of those deaths?
Well, suicide's going to be there.
I was going to ask.
Right?
I'm sure-
Suicide, fentanyl, overdose, but then we got these turbo cancers. You know, and Patrick Soon, he's one of the most amazing 70-year-olds you'd ever see. He's been studying natural defense against cancer. He says, we've always had defense against cancer. It's called our natural killer cells. By the way, what helps natural killer cells? Low stress life, good nutrition, earthing, sunlight, good water. These are all things that help natural killer cells. But going back, and now we can talk about this medical procedure, there's this thing called a spike protein, and we won't talk about how people get it, right? Because we're still censored. But it inhibits an enzyme or a gene called P53. Are you familiar with P53?
No.
It's called the guardian of the genome.
Okay.
It's one of the master checkpoints for cancer. So National Institutes of Health, United States, did a study in the 1990s. They were able to create knockout mice where they could knock out P53.
Just
guardian of the
just for the
genome.
fun of it?
They wanted to see what happened.
Okay.
All the mice got cancer and lived about 1/2 the normal life expectancy, 1/2 to 2/3.
Okay.
So they all died profoundly early. So Patrick Soon has made statements about this, and he hasn't been censored, thank God. He's a multi-billionaire and just in great shape. But he says, I've seen cases, he said, of 11-year-olds with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. That was unheard of.
Yeah.
You got to go, what is going on? Now, keep in mind, is it the toxic environment? Is it the stress? Sure, then throw on inhibiting P53 on top of that, and you've got a formula for disaster.
Wow. That's heavy.
Very. But I like to be light. So what's right? We can do a spike protein detox, right? So
Is there a thing? And
sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Can you just share that?
So I'll give a shout out, and he's got a book now, Brian Artis. He's a really good, outspoken, and brave, because when I was speaking out, my life was threatened. You know, it took me 100 COVID posts before I was told, shut up or we'll shut you up.
Who told you to shut up?
The message actually came from a good student and friend. He said, Bob, they're shutting people up badly. I mean, some people are losing their career, like Peter McCullough. I'm
going to continue. I'm just going to park that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And some people are being killed. He says, Bob, you're on their radar. I suggest you be quiet. Now, why am I on their radar? I've been speaking on the functional medicine circuit for decades. U.S. government has been in my office 5 times investigating me. Jonathan Wright, classic story way back when.
Jonathan Wright, that's
I'm turning the clock back because his story of a medical doctor interested in functional natural medicine, the FBI raided his clinic with machine guns. This is a well-known story.
I didn't know that.
His crime was injecting people with B12. The first conference that I was at that Jonathan Wright was lecturing at, we're talking 30 years ago, he got up there, he says, okay, FDA, I know you're here. I'm not going to say anything that should put me in trouble, but I'm going to share truth, you know? And those of us that share truth, hey, truth is not free. Freedom is not free. Most of us have known that. You look at the amount of censorship that went on. For instance, you know, here's a funny line, and this will be good podcast stuff. I had a group of friends over and we were laughing at people that were wearing masks thinking, what were they going to do? Because even with an N95 respirator mask, the virus was so small that 4 of them could go side by side in tandem through every pore. You might know what joke is coming. So he said, telling people that a mask is going to protect them from the virus is like trying to tell them that your underwear is going to contain a fart, right? Go ahead and get in an elevator and let one rip and see how that works. And I laughed hysterically, and I shared that on Facebook Live.
Right.
But those were ridiculous. There was no reason to do that. 6 feet, no reason to do that. Young people, no reason to shut them down in any way. And in fact, if all the young people that could get COVID did get COVID, who knows if we wouldn't establish herd immunity in 2020. I purposely went and got it in 2020 because of convalescent plasma. That was the very first Nobel Prize. When people beat a virus, they could pull out their plasma, the liquid portion of the blood, infuse it in someone that was fighting a bad virus, and the vast majority of the time beat it. And the 2 studies on COVID had 100% success rate with convalescent plasma by March of 2020.
Let's talk about Dr. Peter McCullough.
Yeah.
I shot a video, it was a YouTube video, and it was one of my most viral videos. This was a recent publication that he posted about natural infection and utilizing the vaccine.
Yeah. It's not a vaccine, by the way.
Well, right.
Yeah.
And the eradicating the spike protein through some protocols.
Yep, we're going to get to that too.
Yeah, I'd love for you to share that.
Well, I want to go to Brian Ardis because I think his work is even stronger than Peter McCullough's.
Okay.
So backstory, Brian Ardis is a chiropractor in Dallas, Texas. Happily married, loved his father-in-law. Father-in-law got COVID, was medically minded, went to the hospital. Shot with remdesivir, which, by the way, was required in the U.S. and I believe here in Canada too.
Yes.
And there was a study on remdesivir related to Ebola, and they had to cancel it because people getting remdesivir were dying at much higher rates than any other intervention.
Right.
That was mandated. He got remdesivir and 3 days later died of kidney failure. And Brian Ardis dug into that. He's like, how does a respiratory virus cause kidney failure? He couldn't find the connection. So then he went through the hospital records. Wait a minute, remdesivir, strong side effect, kidney failure. So he went on a rampage and started sharing all this. Peter McCullough, God bless him. I believe he has, Joe Rogan calls FU money, and Jordan Peterson does that too, and escape velocity. When you've got enough, you can say whatever you want, and who cares if they shut you down? You might care if they kill you, right? But Peter McCullough, how wonderful that he cared so much to share truth. But what was his background? A cardiologist. And then he knew the dangers of cardiomyopathy, and then he sees a young man, maybe 15, 16 years old, getting a shot and then developing cardiomyopathy. He knows that's bad. He's like, let's put a pause on this. And he showed this signal. And by the way, there's one of the top spreaders of misinformation, according to Mercola, was maybe at the very top of the list.
Sure.
But this guy was a multi-billionaire genius from MIT. And he was on a podcast. He was telling the story. He got the shot, because he thought it was his duty to do that, protect my neighbor. I'd protect my neighbor. I protected my neighbor by getting COVID. That's how I think I protect my neighbor. But nonetheless, his housekeeper came in wearing a mask. And he said, well, you wouldn't have to wear the mask if you got the shot. She says, I'm not getting the shot. He says, why not? My brother got the shot and he died of a heart attack a couple days later. And then he talked to someone else, and they knew someone that died of a heart attack in short term. And then finally a third one, he said, wait a minute, 3? That's too many for chance. Let me look into this. So there's a group called VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting Service. And if there's a safety signal, it gets your attention. 3, they ought to shut it down. Do you know how many safety signals were present on this shot? Over 700. Over 700 safety signals. That's why Pfizer wants to bury the information for 75 years. So he went home to his wife and laughingly told her, with what I found, this will all be over in 2 weeks. He said, as soon as this information's out, there's no way anybody's going to get that shot or give that shot.
Right.
He became ostracized even from his best friends. Instead of being a genius who they knew was very qualified to make judgments on statistics,
Right.
they considered him the Antichrist. How dare you? You're trying to destroy humanity. So, Mark Twain, I believe, was the first one that said this. It's far easier to fool a man than to convince him that he's been fooled. So much of society was fooled.
Yeah, indeed. That's still, it's such a controversial topic still to this day, years after the fact. But there's, at least people are really awakening and realizing how much of a...
Well, in our circle they are.
Yeah.
I'll go with Joe Rogan. He said, we lost a lot of good people during COVID. He said, and most of them are still alive. Think about, I don't understand how, I understand how people can be misled. But when it's clear as day, how do you not see it? How do you become so blinded that you can't see it? Maybe John DeMartini has insight on that,
Well, I'm going to talk about Canadian healthcare system, for example, because we've been taught to believe the person in the white coat. Our healthcare is free, right? In contrast to the Americans. And so we put our faith into the medical system because it's free. And so we think that they have our health in their best interest. And so anything that's coming from a different opinion other than the traditional medical model, we're going to question it. So that's how I think Canadians have responded, and that's how the system works.
Well, what if they responded to good information? What if they found out, and by the way, it'd be fun to check on this, but there was a high number of young Canadian residents that died in their residency. So how does that happen? Something is not right there.
Yeah. Let's switch gears. I would love to explore and have you share your wisdom on you teaching other doctors, and you've traveled around the world teaching other doctors in functional medicine, and then kind of a little bit of a deviation. There's a common thread and a common theme of different doctors that you've referenced. Why is it that so many chiropractors are the ones that sort of evolve and then elevate or become enlightened, and they utilize functional medicine and alternative medicine? Why is that?
It resonates with natural philosophy.
Okay.
One of the first lectures in chiropractic is the power that made the body can heal the body. All you need to do is remove the interference. Now, I will say that there are plenty of chiropractors that think that that's the be-all, end-all, cure-all for everything. And as one of my favorite instructors said in chiropractic college, most chiropractors' biggest problem is they think people's only problem is they have a subluxation. Their spine is misaligned.
Right.
There's many other things that precede that, compound that, and need to be addressed. Maybe 100 years ago, when the air was clean and the water was clean and the food had nutrients, maybe an adjustment was what that individual needed. But most of us are realizing, okay, I can balance the structure, I can take some distress out of the nervous system, but if I don't correct that internal toxicity, that malnutrition, that smoldering inflammatory process, this patient is not getting better. Right. And so I think it was a strong desire to help people in realizing what they had was a piece of the puzzle, but it wasn't the whole puzzle. Now, here's where I think medicine has a challenge. I think they think they're the whole puzzle. Hey, take these drugs. You don't need to worry about your food. Classic example, we're still today, you could go into a U.S. hospital and see an endocrinologist telling a diabetic patient, eat all the sugar you want, just manage your insulin. That is really bad advice.
Yeah, just use that
metformin. Nothing to do with health.
Yeah. With what you're doing now, you're still seeing clients and patients, but not as you're pulling it back a little bit. But
for about the last decade, I've been 20 hours a week, which is enough to really enjoy. But the good news is I enjoy a lot of areas of life at this point.
Right, and so you've traveled around the world. You've gone on tour and you've taught doctors functional medicine and orthomoleculars and all sorts of different modalities. What are you doing now that's even more inspiring? Because this is how we've converged our relationship and the influence that you've had on me, and how much just one tool amongst many, but how one tool is really moving the needle forward with some amazing outcomes for people. And it's still very unknown, and it's an untapped sort of industry and people don't know about it. So do you want to share that? Because it's very interesting.
We're always looking for magic levers, right? We want to know what button can we push that would make a big thing. Well, big change in individuals. And you start looking, and coffee is the number 2 beverage in the world, just behind water. Mm-hmm. And by the way, tea is right behind coffee. And how many doses a day? About 2.25 billion of each. Coffee, by the way, I think it's a perfectly good plant if it's clean coffee, but has between 30 and 40 acids dependent upon the species. And here's what we know. Acid is the number 1 toxin produced by the body. It's actually an acid called carbonic acid. When the body makes energy, oxygen goes in, energy is produced, carbon dioxide comes out. Every one of our elimination routes needs to get rid of acid. They all process acid. So do you do better by putting more acid into that system or buffering it? So someone had the brilliant idea, why not put something, reishi mushroom, also known as Ganoderma lucidum, into coffee in a way that, by the way, they don't know it's there, right? They can't taste it, they can't smell it. Reishi is a very bitter herb. If you go to PubMed.gov, type in Ganoderma lucidum, reishi, you'll find over 3,500 published studies, over 100 on cancer, over 50 on diabetes, over 100 on immune benefit, dozens on anti-aging. You go, okay, this is pretty good. How can people get it? Well, what if it was automatically in something they did every day that was a delicious choice, that was more convenient, and in many cases, more cost effective? Mm-hmm. If someone's going to Tim Hortons here or Starbucks or even McCafe, they can get our coffee for less than those, and it's alkaline and infused with a therapeutic dose of reishi. So, I learned, I guess through trial and error, the wisdom of your network is your net worth. When I was working by myself, I was working my butt off, I was making a good living, but oh my gosh, I was on a plane 50 times a year, I was working 60 to 80 hour weeks, kind of loving it, but there's a trade-off. I didn't have as much family time. So suddenly I started sharing this coffee, started sharing it with practitioners, and the network organically grown to now over 30,000 people in over 20 countries with over 60 million in sales. And by the way, if you're watching this podcast and you want to try some of our coffee, I'm going to encourage you to do that. You buy a box, I call it the 1 box challenge. If you don't like it, at the end of it, I'll refund every penny. But that's one of the things that I'm working on. Also trying to strengthen my online presence, a little harder after being so heavily censored after 2020.
Right.
And finally, after 40 years of saying I'm going to write a book, I'm writing a book.
Well, it's about time. I'm going to line up for that book.
Okay,
sure.
Well, you get one of the very first autographed copies.
I appreciate that. Let's go back to you being a practitioner and going on tour, because you've spoke professionally on behalf of various...
The top nutrition companies in the world. Okay. Top functional medicine nutrition companies in the world.
So before you, there were, I'm sure they had other practitioners, other doctors that were doing the same thing. And after you, there's other doctors that are doing the same thing. So you're in practice, you're working with patients, and on weekends, and you're doing other events on behalf of these companies to teach other practitioners. You were loving it, but at the same time, you found something that was even more frugal, or not frugal, more fruitful. So how did you, because that's what I was trying to get at. Like, there's other doctors right now that are doing what you were doing, and they're getting burnt out. They're away from their families, and they're making decent income, but they're not getting the major impact that you're getting now. So please share that, because that's really inspiring.
Well, impact before income. I like to tell people we're mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, social, financial, and impactful. And then I even ask AI, rate all those things in terms of survival and thrival. And if you don't have your physical stuff right, you're not going to survive, right? But the very top was impactful. And they said it's critical for spiritual involvement, which is so fascinating. They said, optional for a lot of life areas, but if you really want to evolve spiritually, you don't do it as a monk on an island. You do it by helping people. So what if you created an easy choice that alkalized bodies, was anti-inflammatory, provided at least trace amounts of all the life-critical nutrients, and was a far better choice than what they were doing, and by the way, also helped the body to detoxify, help the microbiome, instead of shifting those in the opposite direction. So leverage is really the key to life. It really always has been. Whether you're talking about give me a lever long enough, a prop strong enough, I can single-handedly move the earth. But, I would talk about in practice, there's a lot of practitioners that think they need 5, 10, believe it or not, I have heard $20,000 worth of lab before they'll see that patient. Come on. Why? If you understand physical exam and history, you need minimal, if even any. You sat down with someone, you go, well, what's going on? Well, I don't feel well. Tell me about your diet. And it's crap. All right, you've got an intervention. Are you sleeping? No. Are you moving? Well, I play basketball 30 minutes once a week. It's like, nah, that ain't doing it, right? So you sit down and you realize we don't have to get that complex. Confucius, such a sage of wisdom, he said, progress is the complication of simplicity. So we've made a lot of progress in healthcare and sick care. But back to this concept of leverage. I always say if you're a very weak doctor, you need a long lever. If you're a very strong doctor, you don't need any lever than your smile and your heart, and you're in your brain too, right? And I'll put it in that order. You smile and you connect with that patient. You open your heart, a heart-to-heart connection, and now you're going to share something that'll hit home with that patient. And then we're not sharing anything complicated. Let's clean up your diet. Let's get you moving a little bit. Let's drink a little more water. How about we change out that toxic, acidic coffee, which, by the way, 94% of coffee has either herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, molds, mycotoxins, and or heavy metals, or a combination of each. And ours is certified cleanest. Make that little step. Let's see where it goes. And if people are ready to dive in, I'll dive them in. I'll put them in a biochemical boot camp, and change their life in 7 to 10 days. But if you want baby steps, fine. If you want to go fast, fine. Let's do it.
And let's talk about that impact, because when you were on tour, when you're talking to these doctors, you're offering all sorts of different tools so they can add to their arsenal of tools, just supplements, testings even.
Sure.
So why, though, has the coffee been more impactful?
Because it's easy.
And it's
easy, and it's automatic. So, let's say someone's used to eating a junky breakfast, and I said, well, let's have a medical food shake that'll help your body detoxify. Completely different. But now they're drinking coffee every morning anyways, and I tell the story, when I was drinking coffee at Starbucks, and I was a big Starbucks fan, I was spending $500 a month at Starbucks. First thing I do, I'd get up and I'd brush my teeth, I'd drive 10 minutes to Starbucks. By the way, oh yeah, I would stand in line behind people that were crabby because they hadn't had their first coffee. I swear most of them hadn't brushed their teeth, so I don't want to have a conversation with them, right? And then they're paying $5 for a coffee.
How long were you doing that for?
I was too. Well, up until 14 years ago when I invested in our reishi-infused coffee.
So you're a doctor of chiropractic, making an impact, still helping people, but you were even finding yourself at Starbucks.
But let me tell you about coffee, right? So coffee, the biggest coffee study ever, something like 50 million people follow-up years, is people that drink the most coffee live the longest. And there wasn't any differentiation on that. Coffee is full of antioxidants. In fact, it's the #1 source of antioxidants in America, interestingly enough. And other benefits even for blood sugar. Chlorogenic acid, even though it's an acid, good for blood sugar.
Black coffee, not...
No. We're not talking dessert mixed with coffee. Do you want a little coffee with your sugar? No, we're talking coffee.
So for all of you people that get the extra quadruple flavor shot bullshit, whatever, we're not talking about that. We're just talking about plain black coffee.
You got it.
Now infused
preferably
with,
organic.
Right. So explain that and why you're such a big advocate for it. I know you are. It's dramatically improved. So I don't want to deviate too much. We don't have too much time, but Dr. Nandor, my first mentor, was mentored by you. He was mentored by you.
Yep.
And he would just say, Coatsers, I do whatever Dr. Bob tells me to do. And I've found success from that. And so he continued to just focus on the gut, do these things, and then through osmosis, you and I got connected, and then he found out, he's like, Coatsers, just do what Dr. Bob says, you'll be successful. So I have had dramatic improvements in compliance and better outcomes by listening to your teachings, and of course, just adding the simple coffee into every single client's protocol if they like coffee. And sometimes I get lucky. Sometimes they're not coffee drinkers, so it's great. But why is it so powerful?
It's the reishi, right? So it has all the fabulous 50, all the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, proteins, carbohydrates, fat, fiber, and water in doses that make a difference to human health. 79 molecules that are proven to be antimicrobial, and you go to PubMed.gov and see that it blocks replication of HIV, blocks replication of H1N1. There's cases of it eradicating HPV. And by the way, by March of 2020, they had studies that showed that if people use traditional Chinese medicine, in very severe COVID back in that early time, and they were in the hospital, so they probably got remdesivir, they decreased the death rate, not by 27%, by 27x. 27x by just adding traditional Chinese medicine to conventional medicine. International Journal Biologic Science, March 15th, 2020, traditional Chinese medicine. So when I read that and went on Facebook, well, guess what? They put me in jail. You can't share that information. Why not? Don't we want people to survive COVID?
When they're talking about reishi in Chinese medicine, what's the application? How are they administering it? Is it just coming from the mushroom, or is it processed?
They didn't say how they did it there. Way back when, only the royal family could get it, and the most consistent way was making a tea of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I know reishi, or the company that we're both using, Organo, they make their teas and they infuse it with reishi. So again, it's hard sometimes for people to understand and grasp that it's medicinal, it's therapeutic.
Yeah.
And if you just change your regular daily consumption of coffee or tea with this that's infused with reishi, what are some of the things that you've observed? Which is miraculous in and of itself.
Well, let me just give. We've got a wonderful partner, Emily Morrow, and she's a natural nutritionist, not actually a doctor, but she did not tolerate regular coffee, and she had a few things that happened in her body. In fact, her story's public, and I was consulted by her doctor. They said, "Hey, I've got this young lady. She's really struggling. 2 autoimmune circumstances: autoimmune liver, autoimmune thyroid." They think the liver could actually take her out. It's that bad. She's jaundiced and 30 pounds overweight just from fluid. So I put her on a really powerful immune modulating protocol with reishi capsules in it, Ganoderma capsules as part of it. She started turning around really, really quick. And then she said, "Hey, I saw that there's a coffee with that in it. Do you think I could try it?" I said, "Of course you could." She says, "Well, you don't understand. I don't do well with coffee." I said, "You might with this." And just like that, she went from loving coffee, but it not loving her, to loving coffee, and it really loved her. So she just got on Instagram and said, "Hey, listen, I love coffee. Coffee didn't love me until this one. Why don't you try it?" And she's built, God knows what, a multi-million-dollar a year business with one demographic, and I'll even fine-tune it more. Christian women who previously had gut distress from regular coffee. That demographic is a multi-million-dollar demographic from one person.
Well, and that's amazing, because it's not like she's a witch and she's doing black magic. It's a multi-million-dollar business because the product works, but people continue to repurchase.
That's the key, the reorders.
Right.
So if you drink 3 cups of coffee a day, and by the way, believe it or not, they come up with a number 3.03. is the average in North America. And you start drinking at 18 and you live a normal life expectancy, which is 78 or 79, you're going to drink over 60,000 cups. So now you say, what's the difference 1 cup makes? Enough that people will notice it often enough, right? I'd say there's about 1 in 10 people, 1 cup is all it takes for them. They go, "Oh my God, this is so different. I want this." I can only think of people on one hand when they switched it for a week and went, "Oh my God, this is not, I don't think I want to continue with this."
Right.
They really, really, really love it. Well, okay, what's a week at 3 cups a day? That's 21 cups. What about 66,000 cups with herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, molds, mycotoxins, metals, acid, and no Ganoderma?
Compound effect conventional coffee, compound effect coffee infused with reishi mushrooms.
I think we'll see. And I look at the founder of our company. I had dinner with him in Las Vegas a few weeks ago. I think he's approaching 80, but you look at him, you might guess, is he in his mid-50s? I mean, he looks that good on the outside and is that spry and that sharp. And he's been doing it for maybe his entire adult life, reishi in some form.
Yeah. Why? So before we wrap this up, why is it that you're so inspired to teach about this over all sorts of different other options? Because let's face it, you've got worldly relationships with all sorts of different nutraceutical companies, all sorts of different gizmos and gadgets and biohacking tools and things. Why is it that the reishi is so powerful, and why have you aligned yourself with them more than any other brand or any other product?
Well, I'm going to share something that I just recently learned, right? I was at a networking conference, and when you build your network, they say, you got to have systems. Systems duplicate. Because, you could have a spokesperson, very charismatic like yourself. You don't have a problem building a network. You've got an audience, you've got a presence. What about the average Joe? So they say you need systems. But a very successful networker got up there and said, I'm going to blow away this myth. Systems don't duplicate. Simple duplicates. And that really hit home with me, because when I was speaking, maybe the goal, when you're in front of all these doctors, I might present 20, 30 options in an 8-hour seminar. We're talking with hundreds of scientific references. If I could get them to take one of those and take action on it consistently, their practice got better, their patients got better, their revenue got better. But Brendan, not even the majority of people could implement one thing.
And that was your life for how many years?
Still is to some degree, but 30 plus years. 30 plus years. Now I would get the student that would just make me smile. You mentioned Nandor, one of my best students of all time. Here's a guy, I'd teach it, he'd dive in, he'd dissect it, he'd even add value to it, he'd tweak it, and he'd apply it, and every teacher loves that student.
Right.
But most of them come back again and again, and I wanted to start that, but this got in the way. People have their excuses. But coffee, oh my gosh, they're doing it every day automatically. I want you to have a cup tomorrow, message me, see how it goes, right? And, fortunes in the follow-up, I might message them back, how'd you like the coffee? I was still in my old routine. Okay, try it, let me know what you think. And after they try it, they go, wow, this is real, I want to do it. So the reason I'm passionate about this is impact. I can talk to people, I can entertain them, I can give them some wisdom, but if they don't act on it, they don't get anywhere. This is a more convenient, more cost-effective, more delicious, and far more healthy option, and people do take action on it. And that's where impact happens.
It is a multilateral impact. It's low impact because it's easy, but high impact because it's so fruitful.
Yeah.
Right?
And then keep in mind, you might be able to help your entire family. So, I was I was giving a lecture, and, I've got a lot of videos on YouTube, and there was a woman who was, told she needed to have her foot amputated with gangrene. And it looked pretty bad. And if I showed it to, and I have showed it to 100, 1,000 medical doctors, they say, yeah, that foot's got to go. And then I show a picture of it 2 weeks later, and it's 80% better. And that woman only lost the tips of some of the toes. And people said, how is that possible? And here's a functional medicine principle. Whenever there's a problem with any tissue or organ system of the body, there are 3 distinct zones of cells. Cells that are dead, nothing we can do about that. Cells that are fine, nothing we need to do about that. But in between our cells that are functional but not functioning, we get function back, So we got that foot back. And I had a woman come in and she says, my mother has already had one leg amputated. The second has a wound that's not healing. They think they want to get rid of it. Could this help? They started her on the Ganoderma green tea because that's what she liked, and she'd do it multiple times a day and a few capsules of Ganoderma. Well, the wound healed within a few weeks, but she also had severe dementia, and her daughter came to see her, and when the daughter came in the room, and there's a door across that way, she walked in, and the woman's name was Donna Mae. She looked at her, and she says, oh, hi, Jolene. And you might not think anything special about that. She called her daughter by name. For 2 years, she didn't know her daughter's name. So just like that, and at 3 months, the doctor said, wow, the diabetes is in remission, the dementia is in remission. So she lived 2 years after that, and they were 2 quality years. But I asked this question, how much would it be worth for you to get 1 extra valuable day with your mother? How about 2 years with no dementia, no diabetes? That's what's on the line here, or could be, with a fairly simple choice. So I think you owe it to yourself and to your family to try it, and that's how I essentially share, and you could use the word sell this, right? I'm selling it, and by the way, I'm making money on it, and you could too if you wanted to.
Yeah. how many people are struggling with that right now, a loved one in a long-term care facility or something like that, and they're dealing with that, and they're still drinking beverages and they're eating foods. So why not
worst
just,
of the worst.
Of course, the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
So why not just even just change that?
Yep.
So you're saying tea or coffee, and just entertain that.
Yeah.
And see what can happen. See what the possibilities are.
And I will say this, I think there are so many people that's been so long that anything nutritious passed their lips that this is so magic, even in the content, even though it's micronutrient quantity.
Right.
You know, and there's so many good micronutrients and phytochemicals in there that synergy makes a huge difference for many fast.
Mm-hmm. What an amazing conversation.
Went fast, always does.
It does. Thank you so much for this. Before we wrap things up, of course, this is why we're here, sharing the gifts of Ganoderma and the reishi. So if you're interested in trying this beverage, I will put the description in the show notes. You definitely want to try this. I get all my clients and patients to consume it. I see amazing outcomes. So do you. You've been doing this for much longer than I have. And I'm being instructed by my mentor, if I do what Dr. Bob says, I will be successful. So I've been implementing what Dr. Bob says, and I'm seeing success. So if you, listenership, viewership, implement what Dr. Bob is saying and teaching, I assure you, you will see some success. That's fair to say.
Well, you know, here's what I want to compliment you on, being amazing at picking mentors. And, you know, I remember Zig Ziglar talking about mentors way back when, and that might be too old school for you, but he was one of the greatest speakers of all time, right? Of course. And someone went up to Zig and said, you know, I want to be like so-and-so. He says, well, tell me about so-and-so. Well, the guy was making a lot of money, but he was overweight, unhealthy, divorced, unhappy, drinking heavily on the weekends. It's like, you sure you want to be like that guy? Mm-hmm. So if you want a health mentor and to some degree success mentor, hey, we're looking pretty good, right? But in the 7 life areas, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, social, financial, impactful, I encourage people, find someone that you really look up to in each of those categories. And DeMartini calls it traits of the greats. Mm-hmm. You can start to apply their traits in your own world, and then you start to apply it. You'd be amazed at the mentors that come to you, just like are coming to Brendan Coates.
Yeah, I've applied those teachings, and I've seen it coming back to me time and time again. So I'd like to leave you with the opportunity to share some additional wisdom. How would you like to close this conversation? What would you like to say for those that are listening and watching? And what other lessons would you like to embark on before we wrap this up?
Well, one, I have a standard close, and people always ask me what was maybe one of the most impactful things I heard or said over time. And I'll go with Og Mandino and his greatest salesman in the world and his scroll about love. He says, I will greet this day with love in my heart, for love is the greatest secret of success in all ventures. Muscle can split a shield and even destroy life, but only the unseen power of love can open the hearts of men. And until I master this art, I will remain no more than a peddler in the marketplace. And he goes on to say, I will love the sun and the stars and the moon and the earth. But the final comment is most powerful. And most of all, I will love myself, for when I do, I will zealously inspect all things that I allow to enter my mind, my heart, my soul, and my body. I think that's the greatest wisdom I've ever heard. But the greatest wrap-up came from Jim Rohn, the guy that started Tony Robbins. And by the way, I, on my podcast, talked to the guy that spent the last 7 years with Jim Rohn. Chris Widener co-wrote a book with Jim. But Jim, in his brilliant wisdom, would always wrap up with 4 questions. He called them questions to ponder. So here they are. First question is why? Why did you take the time to listen to this podcast today? So many other things you could do. Second question is the answer to the first. Why not? You're talking to people that have a real solid handle on their niche. You know, you don't want to necessarily ask me about crypto or the future of something else, but if it's health related, I kind of got that down. Next question, why not you? Someone's going to take a step. And by the way, Einstein said nothing happens till something moves. That step might be earthing. It might be first morning sun. It might be our coffee. Take that step. And the final question is, why not now? So here's the reality. The longer you wait to act on information, the least likely you are to act on it. Simple act, go look at that link, click on it, go buy a box of coffee from Brendan, and I'll give it 100% money back guarantee, because we know what's in there is better than what you're drinking, and who knows what it'll do for you.
Magical things.
It can be.